OTB AM.
OTBsports.com leads with the article about OTB AM this morning. Still plenty to come, by the way, on this morning's show if you're just joining us. Stuart Byrne will join us to talk about the League of Ireland very shortly. I think at Millwall it can be character building. This is more analysis on Troy Parrott's loan move to Millwall. Stephen O'Donnell then was on with Nathan last night. We're just delighted to be back, says the St. Pat's boss. And Rummenigge says he is holding the door ajar for Thiago Alcantara, the Liverpool target. And John Giles last night talking about Nathan Ake. He's good, but at Manchester City, they need the best. So John Giles is not having it when it comes to Nathan Ake at the moment. Irish Examiner is where we'll start in terms of the sports pages. You got a sense people wanted to say they had helped build it so they could bring their grandkids there. It's 10 years today since a Leinster-Ulster side trounced the Munster Connacht selection in the first game at the Aviva Stadium. Brendan O'Brien is looking back at that. Difficult to see a player reporting their own county, meanwhile, says Donaghy, and Saudis lose patience and scrap Newcastle takeover. That is the Irish Examiner this morning. The Irish Sun, no. Toon tried to get the dough from Riyadh, but they said no. That is excellent, in fairness. Tab of the morning to you indeed from the Irish Sun. Stones is my boy. John Stones could be set for a reunion with David Moyes at West Ham as Manchester City begin their rebuild. And Cesc Fabregas exclusive on Arsenal versus Chelsea FA Cup final in the paper as well this morning. The Guardian. Jumped before being pushed. Saudis abandon Newcastle bid. £300 million takeover collapses over fears consortium would fail Premier League test, and claimed that new City emails cast doubt on CAS verdict. So this is Der Spiegel, who have published new leaked emails relating to Manchester City's past sponsorship with Abu Dhabi state companies, claiming to cast doubt on the Court of Arbitration for Sport judgment that overturned City's ban. In one of the emails, City director Simon Pearce, who was also a senior executive in Abu Dhabi Government Authority, set out that he was forwarding the airline £91 million of £99 million that Etihad owed to the club for its sponsorship, with Etihad providing only £8 million. So some more revelations there coming from the German publication. The London Times leads with Newcastle as well. Stavely fury as Newcastle deal collapses. Fury, upset, a lot of emotions being shown yesterday from those involved in the Newcastle takeover bid. COVID passport plans for fans, meanwhile, says Matt Lawton. Clinical passports for fans is among a number of innovative initiatives being considered by the Premier League in a bid to get supporters back in grounds next season. And Manchester City closing in on £41 million Ake. A tough ask, reads the headline in the back of the Irish Daily Mail. Players are too terrified to tell tales, writes Kieran Donaghy. And a picture there of Curtis Camphor in action against England yesterday. And City land £41 million Ake as cherry picking begins. That is the headline on the big transfer news from yesterday. The Irish Mirror leads with Newcastle. You killed Toon deal. Stavely points finger at Prem rivals for Saudi collapse. Ake set for £40 million. City switches, Pep starts rebuild. And Donaghy says reporting a manager, not for me. The Irish Daily Star says sabotage. Stavely fury at Prem rivals as Toon takeover collapses. You've got a 12-page Galway races pullout in the middle of the paper today as well. And Conor Clifford feels an All-Ireland League could generate enough interest in the game here to see matches picked up by Sky Sports. We could go sky high, is the headline there as he changes in his car. City close to sealing Ake deal then is the headline on that story, covered pretty much everywhere this morning. Back to one of the UK sports pages then, and the Daily Telegraph, as you can imagine, leading with the Newcastle story. Saudis hit out as Newcastle deal collapses. Premier League delays over approval blamed by Stavely. At the moment I am just heartbroken, says bid leader. The Herald. Star backs Blues. McCaffrey loss not a game changer, says Kieran Donaghy, and Saints boss is relieved, which is Stephen O'Donnell, the St. Patrick's Athletic manager. After a few months, this all seemed so far away, and the odds that the league might not even restart. So this is all for us to savour and be thankful that we are back playing football, he says. The Racing Post on the front goes with Magic Mullins. Patrick teams up with Father Willie to land a Galway hurdle with Aramon. And the back of the Racing Post is Stop Trump. Crucible champion could face a tough battle in the opening round. Irish Times then. Koepka rediscovers his rhythm in Memphis. Frustrating day for Irish players Lowry, McIlroy and McDowell. Rodriguez, meanwhile, sets the pace as Spain dominate opening day. This is the Hero Open in Warwickshire. And the comeback is the biggest health hazard for sports stars, writes Johnny Waterson. This is with regards to Mike Tyson and the fact that people are coming back to sport a lot older than they probably should be, especially when it comes to boxing. And the back of the Irish Independent is nothing will derail Dublin bid for 6, says Donaghy, former Kingdom star, backs resilient All-Ireland champions to overcome McCaffrey absence. You've got a picture there of Patrick Mullins celebrating with the trophy after landing the Galway hurdle yesterday. And no let up for leading stars as they brace themselves for a return to action, writes John Fallon on the rugby. So the rugby calendar looks fairly busy, fairly stacked, and it'll be back in a couple of months. We've got 3 stories to go through this morning. Adrian, where do we want to start?
Kieran Donaghy obviously had some interesting things to say about the Jack McCaffrey absence not affecting the Dubs was one, because I think that there's a strong strain of thought right across the country, and I'm sure in your own native County Home, where it's a huge chink of light, isn't it, for other teams, the fact that Jack McCaffrey isn't playing. But maybe now that the dust has settled on that decision, that we're collectively starting to think that, eaten bread is soon forgotten, and all the other teams, or Dublin specifically, will be able to regroup without this guy, and that, maybe that it's Liverpool without Stevie G, that, all the other players will raise their game. They don't have the go-to that they had before. They still have, obviously, tremendous quality elsewhere. But that Dublin can cope without him. I don't know. What do you think?
I think he's probably right. They can definitely cope without him. I think you probably need to chisel away a few more of those stars for them to actually come back to the pack. There is still a distance between them and the rest, and they didn't necessarily do too badly when he was away the last time. So
you're sure they'd want to lose 5 or 6? Is what we're saying?
I definitely think that if you take the 4, let's do the Mount Rushmore of important components of Dublin last year, you can make a case that the 4 are Stephen Cluxton, Brian Fenton, Jim Gavin and Jack McCaffrey. 2 of those are not going to be there this year. So if you wanted to look at it from that perspective, if you wanted to park the airing for one moment, you could make that case. But then other people might say that's nonsense. Dean Rock and James McCarthy are more important to Dublin than Jack McCaffrey and Jim Gavin were, considering what they actually did, and kind of like the postmen that they are delivering every single time they stepped out in the field. You can just make an argument, is my point, that the Jim Gavin and Jack McCaffrey losses would be more keenly felt than many other components in that squad. So, the idea that nothing will derail Dublin bid for 6, I think perhaps that's a bit strong. But I think if you're arguing the possible idea that Jack McCaffrey's absence suddenly means that this is all up in the air again and we have a free-for-all for an All-Ireland, I just don't think that's true. So I
do think that eaten bread is soon forgotten. That I think if after the All-Ireland last year that you were to sit down and say, right, let's, like you're saying, let's pluck out a couple of the key people here. You've just named 4 of them. You take out 2 of those. At that point, you'd be like, "Oh, Jesus, we've got a real chance here." But obviously, you're starting to rationalise things now and be trying to rationalise them in a way that isn't making a great case for Kerry, I suppose, in your own individual case there on. That's the thoughts of Kieran in relation to Jack McCaffrey. And then he's also talking about, obviously, this hotline, the GPA confidential hotline, where, you get to ring up. Do you have to put on an accent when you ring up? I'm not sure exactly how this whole thing works, but you're supposed to ring up and tell the GPA that your manager is putting on a session that he shouldn't be putting on, he or she shouldn't be putting on. I don't know that it works anywhere. I don't know when you ring the hotline, if we're dealing with sort of, the Father Ted priest hotline, or exactly sort of what the dynamic of this thing is, or how it all unfolds, or what the process is afterwards. It seems like a very unusual step that obviously from an optics point of view looks really good. It says that we're taking this thing seriously, and if players do want to come forward and tell us that their team is doing something they shouldn't, we're all ears. I just maybe a little bit like Kieran, in practical terms, I just can't see how it would happen.
Apparently the NBA hotline was ringing off the hook, essentially.
Is that right?
Over the last few weeks, people stepping outside the bubble. But this is a very different situation, isn't it? That is your own health being impacted by people who potentially step outside the bubble or who compromise the bubble, whereas this is compromising rules that won't have as big an impact on your health as possibly contracting coronavirus would. So it's probably different, and also it's a different culture. Like it's a very Irish thing to not tell on your coach if they're kind of misbehaving or breaking the rules in any way. And then there's also a siege mentality within every panel as well.
The point that Kieran was making was that if there's some chance I'm going to get found out, like imagine a club or a county player at their local team shopping them in and getting and it's somehow finding its way. Like in a quiet moment, you tell a mate in a pub who tells a mate that they don't think will tell a mate, and suddenly it's in a WhatsApp group, and before you know it, the whole club and the whole county know that you're the one that shopped them in. Like it's like cheating in golf. That's your you never come back from that.
No.
I mean, unless you're Colin Montgomery and some of the other ones that had just shoe sizes a little bit too big for them, that were, kicking the ball out of the rough when it shouldn't have been. So, I mean, I might just end the analogy there, but it's a tricky one in GAA particularly, I think.
Will we talk a little bit more about the Newcastle takeover and the failed Newcastle takeover bid? Because, as you got a sense of the back pages there, it is everywhere this morning. Has your fury against the Newcastle fans cooled in the last hour?
I'm not sure I'm furious with them. Like I suppose I'm understanding of it. As a sports fan of teams myself, I understand the idea of being put upon. It's like the whole point of going to a game where your team are involved and you lose, and what percentage of sports of fans of the teams who lose leave the stadium or leave their TV at the minute going, listen, beaten by the better team. You want to be walloped before you hear fans saying that. Normally it's, the ref did us over, the manager isn't good enough, we don't have the players, etc., etc., etc. So being put upon is a kind of a rite of passage for sports fans generally. So look, I get that. I'm not sure I'm furious with them. This one is slightly different in that we're dealing with a regime, as we said earlier, where if it's a dictatorship and if you're gay for that crime, in inverted commas, the punishment can be death. So, I would question where the line is, I suppose, the thing.
It's very easy to kind of separate that from the reality, though. And Newcastle fans will say, what's the big difference between that potential regime coming in and ruling our club and what's happening at Manchester City, for example?
I understand the point, but I don't ever really accept that because it's shit over there, that it's got to be shit here. I think that...
but their point might be that it's not actually over there. It's all here. It's England. It's the Premier League. We're all in the one division.
I'm saying in relation to Man City that just because another club are doing it doesn't mean that you have to accept that it happens at your club too. I don't think that's a rationale that stacks up. But I understand that's... it's the big theme that's come out of this is the heartbreak of the Newcastle fans that this takeover hasn't gone through, and I just wonder if it's the best thing that might happen. There's already discussions about. I just saw very scant murmurings of it this morning that there's yet another takeover bid possibly in the pipelines. There's probably no better time to come in and offer a sum of money to take over the club than there is at the minute, because they're obviously on their belly from a fan's point of view, and they're thirst to have somebody other than Mike Ashley take over. And he's obviously seen the 300 million quid slip through his fingers. There's also a load of different rationale depending on what reports you read as to exactly why all this has happened. Was it to do with it wasn't, we believe, from the Premier League's point of view, to do with the human rights abuse. It was more to do with the broadcast rights piracy. Yeah. Which in itself, as you say those words, seems fairly bizarre. It was more to do with that. So was it that, or was it that Mike Ashley changed the price at the last minute, or was it a mismanagement of the deal? Nobody really knows. I don't buy this thing was taken. We were going to spend 300 million quid. One of the things that's come out was that that Amanda Staveley and the Saudis were saying they were going to spend the 300 million quid, but it was taking too long and that they couldn't wait another couple of weeks to spend the 300 million quid. I don't buy that for a second, I have to say. I think that maybe the wind of change was just against them. They knew what was coming down the track. They got out before they were pushed out. I don't know, but there's probably no better time to be going in at Newcastle. I think the common thing would be that they are such a massive club. I've been up there. The whole town is, it's all the cliches you hear about Newcastle, and how involved in the success of the football team the entire city is absolutely true. And the stadium sort of sits up a little bit above the city, looking down. It's got that fairly symbiotic relationship, and I think, you know, as a football fan, you'd love to see somebody come in there who was doing the right thing by the club, but I don't know how close they are to that.
Yeah, I wonder where BOutQ and what games they don't illegally stream for free. Like, is it just Premier League? I mean, maybe they don't do it for La Liga, and therefore they might actually turn their attention towards Spain. Like your point about this being a good time to take over Newcastle, I'm not sure if I fully go along with that. Like the idea that there was going to be guaranteed success when you take over at Newcastle only existed because they have so much money and they're a nation state taking over a Premier League football club. If you're a billionaire coming in to take over, you're not going to have the wealth that Saudi Arabia had. You're not going to have the wealth to outspend a lot of the big six, or potentially you think you will, but after a couple of seasons, the well might run dry a little bit and the owner might actually be reluctant to spend a bit more money. Whereas with the nation...
And do you know, sorry, I want to go across you. I think that you're right, and I think that the old reasons why it was good to buy a club like Newcastle don't exist to the same degree anymore. Like, they've got a huge local fan base, and you can sell loads of tickets, and you can sell loads of merchandise. Like, that's pennies now, right? Compared to the wealth that a regime like that will be able to bring in, and they don't have the global fan base that you could tap into in a way that United, City to a lesser degree, and some of the other bigger Liverpool, some of the other bigger clubs would have.
Very quickly, before we wrap up, Adrian, you've been looking at the rugby stories this morning. Jerry Thornley, for example, writing in the Irish Times, cramming exercise will put all concerned to the test. We're getting a greater idea of how the rugby calendar at the end of 2020 is going to look.
Two brief points on this. One of them being that I think they were talking about the rugby championship and wound up over a short period of time only in New Zealand. Actually struck me as something that would be a phenomenal idea going forward, that you would just convene all teams in a Rugby World Cup type state, all teams in one country for a shorter period of time. It cuts down on air miles, it cuts down on the longevity of the tournament. You know, that doesn't necessarily have to be at the expense of all the commercial. I think you can maintain all of that. Definitely a format worth looking at. And the other thing is that, like all the rest and recuperation that players' bodies have been able to get into over the last sort of 5 months to maybe re-energize themselves, like, are we, given the squeezed nature of the calendar between next is at the end of August and the end of the year, given that we're going to run off the Six Nations, a couple of games for Ireland to play there, we're going to have this new Six Nations +2 tournament, we're going to have the Champions Cup, there's going to be a lot of stuff squeezed into a short period of time. Is all that good or going to be undone? It's quite possible, I would think.
Yeah. Another story this morning as well that we should mention is inside the Irish Sun, an exclusive by Jason Byrne, that Monaghan star Jack McCarron looks set to miss the rest of the GAA year. He's damaged cruciate ligaments in club championship at the weekend. Obviously a huge loss for Seamus McInerney's side. He hasn't had a lot of luck with his injuries over the past few years. That is the sports pages for you this morning. Let's have a look at the OTB Sports app before we wrap up. This is your homepage, the feed with all the stories, as we've been mentioning this morning. You've got your latest videos and your latest podcasts there. You will be getting our podcasts first on the OTB Sports app, not least the OTB AM podcast, which is up from 10 o'clock every morning. The app, by the way, if you haven't got it yet, is available in the Google Play Store or in the App Store. You've got the live radio tab there as well, where you can listen to us live and any live content from OTB Sports Radio throughout the day, and then the podcasts there again in its own tab. So that is the OTB Sports app available now. OTB AM is live in association with Gillette. Good morning start with Gillette, giving you the confidence to tackle the day ahead. It is 9:08 on this Friday morning, and plenty to come this hour. Deal or No Deal and Stuart Byrne on the return of the League of Ireland, and we'll be back straight after the break with a special report on Kenyan athletics. Jake O'Donnell travels to Eitan, Kenya for OTB Sports and the Simon Cumbers Media Fund. That's up next.
OTB AM.